don't know if these statements are in any of our stuff already. They might be, but he didn't check. He's just saying, please double check.
There's something is clicking in the back of my head saying, when we reviewed the maps, the criteria that they gave us, I think it's a base flood elevation mark that we do not have in this town, so it does not require us to do a bunch of stuff. I can't remember
There's a lot of stuff that I was looking at for some reason.
I would suggest before you go and adopt anything that comes from any agency like that,
Right.
you go back in our records.
There's a bunch of stuff about floodplains in the zoning ordinance.
Right.
A bunch of stuff.
And they very generously went through our whole zoning ordinance and cut it up and rewrote it.
Send it right back to them.
So here's what they suggested. They took just Article 9, which is called Floodplain Development Management Ordinance, which is in there for this specific purpose, to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. And the compliance review is to go through and essentially take a document that we have, read it, and see if it actually jives with the federal laws or federal program, whatever it is. By their program rules, we have to have our zoning matching what their rules say in order to qualify for the program. So he found specific things that do not match, and he highlighted, you can see they're highlighted and crossed out, things that have to come out or things that needed to be added, like here's the highlighted with the italics, things that have to be added. Yes?
In order to do, we are doing this because those people who live in the floodplain, if they are ever flooded out, will we have federal insurance?
If
they can
those
obtain
individuals
federal insurance.
decide on buying the federal,
Mhm.
if those individuals who live in a floodplain wish to have federal funded, federal backed flood insurance, they have to apply for it themselves. But I guess if we don't have it in our zoning ordinance, then they're disqualified from
Right.
it.
If our zoning has to match the rules set down by the National Flood Insurance Program, in order for those people within the base flood elevation area that I've mentioned, for them to qualify to even participate in the program, our zoning has to be matching what they're
Can they
hoping
get a
for.
mortgage without,
They may restrict you from some federal mortgage programs because of it.
The mortgage person might require flood insurance because they're in that area.
But it doesn't have to be national flood insurance.
They gotta get flood insurance from somewhere. I
It's
mean,
a way a less expensive
Yeah.
option from people buying those 2 or 3 properties. That's the sticky
Yeah.
wicket. I mean,
And with
it's hell for us, but we shouldn't forsake the 1 or 2 that may need it. And
yes, and there's a real good chance that in these times with constricted lending at the local levels, that banks or credit, whoever's making that mortgage may be very much of a sticky wicket and really require flood insurance. And if they can't get second party flood insurance, their insurer of last resort is the federal government. And if we are not in compliance, they can't go for that. They can't get the mortgage.
So we're not talking about thousands of people.
We're talking about 4 houses.
Well, there may be more, because I've run into this in the past where a customer of mine applied for a building permit to put an addition on their house on Walsh Lake. The elevation of the house from the high water level was probably around 15 feet at high level, and it was on a knoll. But that knoll was incorporated in the floodplain. So based on the maps, that house was in the floodplain and it could be flooded out if Walsh Lake rose 15 feet. And that would flood Newfield and everything else downstream right to the Saco River, I think. But anyway, they got the variance or the change, and they had to get a surveyor out there to verify the house was not in the floodplain. But the floodplain was a very general indication on the map. It cost them a little bit of money, and almost 3 or 4 month time delay in the receiving a building permit for it. So it is something that, you know, you have Kingswood Lake here, and how many houses and camps are right down on the water. That lake will probably never flood, even 40 days and 40 nights of rain. It'll probably never rise.
They'll pull the boards and it'll go
Right.
downstream. And
Right. It'll flood everything
And
downstream.
it'll flood everything in Cedar Park.
Yeah, and Cedar Park. But what I'm saying is, that is a potential floodplain around the lake, the perimeter of that lake.
But it's not designated. This is
Right.
only applies as in the designated area.
Yeah.
And
And the lake isn't designated?
nope, the only designated area in town is down behind Cedar Park,
Wow.
in that mushy area. So.
The funny thing is, in our 100-year flood, there was no flooding.
And I remember when we went through and looked at
Yeah, I remember.
the thing, it was the designation was base elevation area with no measurement ever taken. And I remember we discussed that very carefully because it was a guesstimate, and then we had to work through the legalese to figure out it was a guesstimate, and that had never been tested or measured. But they're pretty sure that was flood area.
We're talking
Well, I
legality.
And as Eddie just said, a 100-year flood was a few years ago, and it didn't flood.
And as Steve was mentioning, we're talking legalities as far as somebody's
Right.
availability
I'd
to
look into it.
financing or zoning.
And, you know, to us, sitting here in this room, this is not a big deal. None of us live in those 4 houses, or that small little area. But I'll bet it's a pretty big deal to those 4 families.
Sure.
Yeah, flood-
Especially if they
flood
wanna
floods
sell
on
a
it.
house.
So
The insurance really isn't going to make a difference.
I don't think that there's anything, I mean, I have not fully read this, but
I don't trust the feds monkey around.
I don't trust anybody except for us to do our own business. But I think that this should be something that we move forward on to make sure that we're in compliance, that those families don't get left out in the cold.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that would be, you know, dereliction of our duty as, you know, town planners.
Don't think that the federal government knows better than we do.
What do you mean?
Yeah, but don't think you can tell the government what they know. They'll never listen to you. Yeah, Rob.
Could you get us copies?
Yes, I only have 1 copy because I literally didn't print this out till I was coming down. But I'd be glad to get copies to everybody. I'll forward it to you. Oh, okay. Good.
Can you get us copies tonight?
Absolutely. After the meeting, we'll just copy it. Anybody who wants a copy.
If
So-
there are problems, we'll use-
So this is the other thing that I was very concerned about on zoning timeline for amendments. Okay, so that's that. Rob, you got the floor again. We're back to Rob.
Okay. So, I'm going to go through this. I'm sorry that it's as long as it is. I don't think it's nearly as dense as it might seem.
Did we make copies for you, Rob?
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
sorry, Rob, but I think she-
Do we have copies of that, George, or do we not
There
have
were
copies?
copies on the table. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Here it is. Yep.
It's going to be like the, I'm sorry.
No, it's a 5-minute recess. 1 minute recess, I'm not sure.
I think people are shuffling around. We can wait. No need for recess. I'll just do this.
It's just, it's not working well tonight. You have a copy of that?
Yeah, I got a copy right there.
Okay.
Because I can't see it.
Yeah.
It's only a little bit blurry here. I'm counting on it.
Okay, so I assume this will be attached to the minutes. This is going to go through a document that has title Accessory Uses Home Occupations. This is a citizen's proposal to the Brookfield Planning Board by me, Rob Collins. My purpose tonight with this proposal is to clarify the zoning ordinance with regard to some of the permitted accessory uses in RA1. And let me just say up front that if this doesn't resonate with people at all, people disagree with it, I'm okay with that. What I'm looking to do is look at where our zoning has been contentious or has led to discussions and disagreements and people not seeing our zoning the same way and looking for opportunity to try to clear some of those things up. And in discussions among the previous iterations of this board, there's been clear differences in how people interpreted what was there. And to me, that just seems like something we can and probably should clean up, if we can agree on how to clean it up. Okay, so I'm going to start reading through this background. Brookfield's residents have a long history of utilizing their dwelling, accessory buildings, and land to make a living while providing goods and services to the other members of the community. These traditions certainly predate the adoption of the zoning ordinance by 100+ years, and the current zoning ordinance reflects the desirability of these accessory uses to the community. Over the years, the enforcement efforts of the Board of Selectmen of the related provisions of the zoning ordinance have allowed residents to pursue a wide variety of home-based occupations / businesses. There are many differing points of view about the specifics of what the current zoning permits and prohibits with regard to home occupations, even among members of the planning board. However, I'm not aware of a recent occasion where the selectmen have shut down or even limited the scope of an attempted home occupation type use. The current zoning ordinance wording leaves much to be desired. The allowed uses are for, quote, customary home occupations, which is only vaguely defined by way of a list of examples, including recognized professions, trade persons, and cottage industries, which themselves are left undefined. In addition, the restrictions are applied inconsistently. For example, trades can use an accessory building, but a recognized profession or cottage industry apparently cannot. Fair, clear, and understandable zoning language will help clarify what is and what is not permitted, and may lead to a bit more harmony in our community. Most municipalities either prohibit or put severe restrictions on home-based businesses in residential zones. As is often the case, typical zoning restrictions would conflict with Brookfield's traditions and way of life. I am not suggesting that we adopt the sorts of restrictions and procedures that most other towns employ. Instead, I'm suggesting relatively minor zoning ordinance wording changes to clarify and codify current practice in Brookfield with regard to home occupations. Any questions or comments so far? Okay. So next what I've done is laid out the parts of the current zoning that I think are relevant to home occupations. Article 2, districts. A is RA1. Number 1, permitted uses. Item B, this is on page 2 of 53 in our zoning ordinance. It says, customary home occupations such as offices of recognized professions, trade persons, cottage industries, and bed and breakfasts. The property owners of record, managers, or lessee must live in any structure used as a bed and breakfast. Adequate off-street parking with safe ingress and egress of vehicles is required. One accessory building used in the performance of the trades is permitted. External storage of occupational equipment and supplies will be screened from view either by fencing or dense vegetation. The number of persons engaged in any one or combination of customary home occupations shall not be more than 4, excluding the occupants. The outside residential character of the property shall be maintained. And then Article 2, districts. A is RA1, 2, non-permitted uses. This is on page 4 of 53. Item A, animal hospitals and boarding kennels. Item B, automobile service or filling stations, sales, or repair facilities. Item C is a boarding house, convalescent home, dormitory, fraternity or sorority house, hotel, inn, lodging, or rooming house, or other similar home or structure. In Article 3, general provisions, item E on page 9 of 53, persons who conduct home occupations shall be allowed one signboard no greater than 6 square feet to advertise activities conducted on the premises. The sign may be two-sided, and then it goes on with other stuff not related to that. Also in Appendix C, workforce housing requirements. Item 5, home occupations on page 49 of 53. Home occupations are allowed as an accessory use provided that the home occupation use is incidental, subordinate, and related to the primary use as a dwelling. No one other than the residents of the dwelling shall be employed in the conduct of the accessory use. The home occupation creates no increased traffic and requires no additional parking. The home occupation does not materially harm or affect the residential or rural quality of the area and does not pose a fire, or toxic hazard